What most people don't know is early in his career, Samuel Colt, not a terribly good businessman. First he had the Patersons, then of course we got the Walker, then you get the 1851 Navy, but the pinnacle of Colt open-top guns was the 1860 Army.
For the whole history of Colt's manufacturing company, all the way from the Paterson guns in 1836, right up to the eve of the Civil War, Sam Colt is obsessed with getting a military contract. And he keeps trying and he keeps trying, and he sells some guns to the Texans. He sells some guns to the U.S. Cavalry, but it's really that big military contract that continues to elude him. And it's not until 1860, really again on the eve of the American Civil War, that it culminates in one of the finest percussion revolvers ever made.
The thing that really put the 1860 on the map, more than 200,000 of these things served with Union troops during the American Civil War. And they bridged that gap from cap and ball into the cartridge era. Cartridges were around in 1860, but they just weren't commonly used. And the thing, I just love the lines of the 1860 Army. They call them open-top guns because they don't have a top strap. So the barrel and frame are joined by a wedge pin that's forward of the cylinder, and it just gives the gun just great lines.
The gun itself was used throughout the Civil War. It was probably the preeminent gun of its type during the war. Now, it did have kind of a major rival in the 1858 Remington, and the 1858 Remington actually ended up kind of surpassing it in interest in the War Department, mainly because it was cheaper. Personally, I fired them both. The Remington has the advantage of having a solid frame, and you can change the cylinders. Some people say, oh, they could change the cylinders in battle. They never did that. I've never read an account in my life of where the cylinder was ever changed in battle. It's just an impractical situation. The 60 Army was less prone to fouling. You could fire more rounds out of it than you could with the 1858 Remington, mainly because it had a much larger cylinder arbor. And there were also take-up grooves, black powder fouling take-up grooves in the arbor. All in all, a class act. When anybody asks me what I think the most beautiful handgun ever made, I immediately know the answer. The Colt 1860 Army. It is absolutely one of the most gorgeously designed, svelte, stylish revolvers extant. The gun was made in 1860, but its lines would fit right in with Art Deco in the 1930s. I mean, it's a lovely gun. That being said, it was also probably the top of the end percussion revolver manufactured by the Colt Company.
The first 3,000 of them that were made were actually sent south before the actual Fort Sumter beginning of the war started. Colt was pretty much making and selling revolvers south of the Mason-Dixon as fast as he could get wagons to cross the border. And the first 2,000, a lot of them were sold to North Carolina, to Georgia. A number of them had fully fluted cylinders. So when you see one with a fully fluted cylinder and a serial number under 3,000, it's a good chance that might have Confederate provenance to it.
The other thing that people don't often recognize when they're looking at either the 51 Navies or the later 1860 Armies is the roll stamp on the cylinder itself. A lot of people think that that's some kind of U.S. naval scene, and really it has nothing to do with U.S. military history at all. It is actually a reference to the Battle of Campeche off of the Yucatan Peninsula in 1843 during the Yucatan Rebellion. And some people might think, well, that's such an odd thing to put on a U.S. military revolver. Why would anyone do that? Well, one of the commanders during that battle of the Texas Navy, which took part, was Commodore Edwin Moore. Moore is the guy that actually bought Colt Paterson revolvers for Texas from Samuel Colt during his early years. And so when it came time to add a little bit of a elegant touch to his 51 navies and his 60 armies, Colt paid homage to Edwin Moore and his fight off the Yucatan Peninsula with that roll stamping.
Remington marketed their Army and Navy revolvers, their new model Beals and such, that they were a stronger framed gun because they had a top strap or solid frame to them. And that Colt's frame, came apart and didn't have a top strap. And they said that the other gun type would had a tendency to shoot loose or would be warped or bent. And the fact that this gun for me particularly has been one of my personal favorites my entire life. I have never, ever seen a gun that was loose or bent, where the top strap was a factor in whether the gun functioned or not. I think that was a marketing ploy that Remington tried to take advantage of what might be perceived as a design flaw in the gun.